So, welcome to this lesson in how to find the right note, or notes when you're playing, because this can really be a challenge. In the beginning, when I started soloing, I used the pentatonic scale only, or the minor pentatonic scale, maybe as a blues scale. And when I got tired of that, I started introducing the diatonic scale, or just your major scale, minor scale, under one hat called the diatonic scale. And that has 7 notes in it instead of these 5. And so I was just searching and probing for every note I played, trying to really to come up with something that sounded decent, because that was so easy in the pentatonic scale, because it was just cleaned out of those 2 notes. Because the pentatonic scale, penta, means 5, is comprised of 5 notes, as the diatonic scale is comprised of 7 notes. So those 2 notes really made a huge difference. But so how do we find the right notes when we're playing? We have chords running in the background and we want to create a great melody on top of that. What do? We know the scale, we know the key, but what to do from there? And there are really 2 approaches, 2 schools if you will. First of all, you can learn the arpeggios of the chords being played. So for instance, if you're playing in A minor, we have a chord built from each of these scale notes. So we have 7 notes, A, B, C, D, E, and so on. And from each of these, we have built a chord. And so there are 7 of those, and you can learn all their arpeggios, meaning you can learn to play the notes of the chord within that scale, and then you can hit those more than you hit those notes that doesn't sound as good. I hope that makes sense, but that's the one approach, and we're not going to talk more about that right now. The other approach is simply training your ear to listen for what notes sound good. And of course that was what I was doing in the beginning. I was searching and probing, but because the challenge is so huge and the fretboard is so big, I just never got around to doing anything about it, because I never really learned anything, because the challenge was just too big. Until I created a simple system that I'm going to talk about now. Because the whole key here is to take a little piece of the whole and then develop the ability to play only by ear on that little piece. And you just pick a piece small enough for you to master it very, very fast, because that will give you a sense of that you can really do it. And so ear training is traditionally a method where you train your ear to listen for intervals. So for instance, if you've been training your ear, you would know that this is a fifth. 2 notes with a fifth apart, and this would be a tritone interval. You would be able to just listen your way to that. A fourth and a third, minor third. And if you classically been training your ear, you would know the difference between the 2. And you would also be able to listen for chords. That is 3 or 4 notes together, and being able to identify those immediately. That is a fine skill. I just never really had a place where I really needed that skill. It's not like I'm happy I can hear the difference between it's not like that. But the ear training that had really benefited me is finding the right note, really. Just having chords play in the background, and then having a system that allowed me to cover the whole fretboard in very little time. So let's do that now. Let's just get an experience of what that means. And how we're going to do it? Well, we're going to pick only 3 notes as an example here, in the 5th, the 7th, and the 8th fret. And those are the only 3 notes that we can work with. And then we're going to play different sounds, because now we're not talking chords here. We're talking sounds, because a chord is a symbol. It's a C with a 7th, or an A with an M, meaning A minor. That's a chord. But a sound is an experience. Sorry to be so philosophical, but this is very practical. A sound is an experience. And different chords within the key sound like each other. And we're going to utilize that when we train our ear, because we really only have 3 basic sounds in any scale. So whether you're playing the harmonic, the melodic, the whatever scale, and you have 7 different chords in all of them, you basically only have 3 basic sounds. So what we need to learn is to find the notes that fit these 3 sounds. It might be different chords, but it's only 3. I hope that makes sense, because that really limits the challenge here. We only have 3 sounds now instead of 7. and we limit ourselves to a little piece of the fretboard. So let's do that, and let's put on the jam track. I'm just going to pick a jam track that has a long piece of the first sound, and I'm not going to tell you what sound it is, what chord it is, because that will make us enter the world of concepts. Instead, just listen for the sound, use these 3 notes, and rely solely on your ear to figure out how these 3 notes sound on top of this sound. Here it comes. Listen to that one. Not too bad. This is totally in sync or in harmony. There's tension here on the last note. So now I'm familiar with them over that sound, familiar with the different notes, then I can start resting and focusing on those notes that sound really good. I can use them all, it's just a matter of what I'm focusing on. Focusing on that note there. Another sound. This suddenly sounds good. This also sounds good. Tension here, but still good. Here comes a new sound. Sounds good. Sounds good. Tension, but it's okay. And then in this way, you simply become acquainted with these 3 notes. And then when you can do that, you can move on to the next jam track, which is also included if you go to my website. You can just, if you're on YouTube, click the link below this video. It'll take you right to that page. No registration or email necessary. You can do the next track, which is much faster. So the first sound is here. Next sound. New note there. Last sound. Moving up there again. And then back again. So this is pretty easy actually. This is not a hard task. You're just sitting, having a good time, listening for the sounds in the background, trying not to think about chord notes or anything, and just relying on that. If this is just super easy and super boring, you could just take the next string as well. You can go for the 5th, the 7th, and the 8th on the next string, the B string. So same frets, and you just do it in the same way. And please don't rush this. Be sure that you are constantly building, because you have to go all the way. You have to go all the way to super easy before you can really relax when you're playing. So that's my best advice on this. So let's just try and incorporate the next string as well. With the first is good, the second is good. Tension here, but still good. Next chord, or sound. So my brain is getting used to this. New sound. And I'm getting used to I don't necessarily have to know what chord it is to be able to know it, because I'm just knowing it on a different level. Now let's try to use 2-string. I'm home there and I'm home here. So now, and this might take you 10 minutes to build this kind of confidence in just that little secluded place there. And you can of course just, take each string in the scale, each position all the way up, and you're free to do that. Or you can follow a simple system that just shortcuts the whole process and lets you use just a fraction of that time. thinking. Really thinking about things before you embark on them is such a really rewarding thing because you can save immense amount of time. So this is the concept, and when you train your ear like that, you can begin to speak music really, because instead of speaking words, you are just speaking music. And what that means is that there's no distance between what you want and then doing it. When I'm speaking right now, it's just a string of associations, as I've mentioned, and the same thing happens here. It's just a string of being inspired by what you just played before. So you play something, and then you play the next logical thing, and the next logical thing. But to be in that state, you can, because that's two different hemispheres in the brain. One hemisphere deals with scales and arpeggios and theory and all of that. The other hemisphere deals with just pure creativity. And those two can work together. But when you have the optimum state, really, is when the left part of your brain, which is really the analytical, reasoning, theory, scales, arpeggios, when that just relaxes and say, okay, we don't need anything here from me, I don't need to think about where we are, I can just relax. And then that right hemisphere of your brain, which is just pure creativity and pure staying in the now with what you're doing, that can really come through. And that is something that most people don't have. They have a mind that talks incessantly all the time, from when they wake up in the morning till they go to sleep at night. You have a chance to use your passion here, your instrument, to reach a point where you can just create without really you creating, because it just happens. It's just pure creativity. And many people say, oh, that's impossible to learn. You have to, spend 30 years playing, and then it's still just a rare kind of talent that enables you to do that. But that's simply not true. There are basic, simple exercises that you can do that can bring you to that place very, very quickly if you use them. Let those be the last words of this video. See you in the next one.